What's up, YouTube people? Shaggy the Reddit coming at you live. Trying to look up this song my friend was asking me to play, and I am not having any luck, so we'll probably try again at the end of the stream. Shouts out Natural Onyx. You are an awesome artist doing some really unique stuff. Um, but I gotta remember if I even have a SoundCloud account. So, without further ado, though, today we are reading Harry Turtledove's The House of Daniel. Damn, Daniel. um, which is about the Great Depression and baseball, and probably some alternate timeline involved as well because it's Harry Turtledove. So I guess before we get going, it's going to be kind of a short stream today, but still going to give you guys like a good 45 minutes to an hour. Huge shouts out to Brittany Hicks, Against the World G in the building. Octawave. One love, Octawave. And of course, don't watch Continue Dog Rose, the fine folks over at the Alternate History Hub Discord, as well as the American Odyssey Project Discord, and a couple other Discords. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but you already know I do that. Without further ado, The House of Daniel by Harry Turtledove. It would have been the first part of May. I remember that mighty well. Spring has a special magic to it. Or spring did once upon a time. Anyway, I remember that mighty well too. But when the big bubble busted back in 29, seems like it took half the magic in the world and went with it. More than half, maybe. In the 5 years after that, we tried to get by on what was left. We didn't do such a great job of it either. One thing the big bubble took with it when it busted was half the world's work. Half the world's work. Oh, yeah, that's technically true. People who had to sell things all of a sudden had more of them than they knew what to do with. They tried to unload them to other people, but the ones who all of a sudden didn't have money to buy them, they couldn't hardly hire those people to make more things when nobody could afford the stuff they already clogging their warehouses. And it was a great big mess. Hell and breakfast. It's still a great big mess now. And nobody but nobody has the first notion of how long it'll go right on being a big mess. Take a look at me, for instance. Not like I'm anything special. You find guys just like me in any town from San Diego to Boston. More of them in those big cities, matter of fact. But take a look at me anyhow. You might as well. I'm right here in front of you talking your ear off. Jack Spivey at your service. I know too well I'm not extra handsome. I'm not what you'd call homely either. I was 24 on May. I account that I was born in February of 1908. Odd enough to know better, you'd think. Well, I would have thought so too. Only goes to show, doesn't it? So there I was on that bright May morning, walking along the Spruce Street in Enid, Oklahoma. I didn't have 2 quarters to jingle in my pocket. Yeah, plenty like me, Lord knows. Too damn many like me. I wasn't thinking about much of anything, if you want to know the truth. Maybe wondering how come the leaves on the trees didn't seem so bright as they had before the bust up, why the grass looked like it was a duller green. Your hotshot wizards, they'll tell you things that have really changed. They'll tell you it's all in your head. What I'll tell you is your hotshot wizards weren't down walking Spruce with me the first thing this morning. Flour mill took up a whole block of spruce. The mill got built the year before things went to the dogs. Timing, huh? It hadn't run flat out since. It still didn't run, though. I'll give it that much. Some of the jobs the big bosses were bragging about when it opened up were there that day. Some of them were, but not all of them. Sure, I'll tell you what I mean. While I walked by there, a man was rolling a big barrel of flour to a truck. Only he wasn't a man, he was a zombie. His face was as gray as the slacks I had on, and just about as shabby looking. No, he wasn't rolling a barrel very goddamn fast. Tell you the truth, he was rolling it like he had all the time in the world. If you're a zombie, you do, or you might as well. But how much do you reckon the rich folks who won the mill were paying him? Right the first time, friend. Zombies work for nothing, and you can't get cheaper than that. Back when times were good, a good fella or a sober fella, if they could have found one, would have been rolling that barrel. The rich folks wouldn't have paid him much, but they wouldn't have paid him a little something. Now they have folks working inside the mill. They never would have before, let me tell you. They pay him a little something, but not much. Some of them white guys who would have earned more, they were out on the street without any silver to jingle in their pockets and scared the werewolves away, just like me. Oh, God, it's werewolves. I haven't read this before, so I didn't know. But that's kind of awesome. The issue with them and me was I know how to go about it. I've been scuffling and doing a little of this, a little of that, a little of other things since before I had to shave. Those guys, they thought they had a job at their life. They didn't know what the devil to do with themselves after it got taken away. Some of them drank at the saloons across from the street at the mill. Anything stronger than 3-2 beers is against the law in Oklahoma. That doesn't mean you can't get it, only that it costs more. Even before the repeal, mill hands would drink at those saloons when they come off their shift. Now they were there at all hours. Well, they could afford to buy anything, I mean. Just past the saloons were a couple of pool rooms and a sporting house. The house had to let girls go. That's how bad things were. It doesn't get any worse now, does it? Not really. Shit. I walked into one of the pool halls. A couple of guys were shooting slow, careful 8-ball at the front table. They looked over when the bell above the door jangled and relaxed as soon as they saw it was me. It's not like I was somebody they hadn't seen plenty of times before. Arnie, the guy who ran the joint, he'd seen me plenty of times too. He hardly moved his eyes up from the vampire pulp he was reading. He was near as pale as a vampire himself. I don't think he ever went outside. He was wearing a green celluloid eye shade with the book keepers, like he always does. How are you doing? He asked me. His voice had more expression than a zombie's, but not a lot more. Most of the time, he didn't talk to me at all. When he did, sometimes it was business. I'm here, I answered. What's cooking? Already knew people. He heard things. Like now. I hear Big Stew's been asking after you, he said. Has he? I said. Obliged. And I touched the brim of my cap, cloth cap, not ball cap. Then I turned around and walked out. As soon as I got back on the street, the grass looked greener, and the leaves looked, well, leafier. I'm not saying they were, but they looked that way. To me, they did. Amazing what the thought of some work will do. It wouldn't be nice work. You didn't get nice work from Big Stew. Some people wouldn't call it work at all. They'd call it burglary or battery or some such name. But Big Stew paid off all those people. And he paid people who did things for him. He paid them good. You can't be too fussy. Not since the bubble busted, you can't. Big Stew ran a diner near Independence near the Artist Gallery. You came in from out of town, you could get the best beef stew between Tulsa and the Texas line. The barbecue was tasty too. You get other kinds of things at Big Stew's diner, but you had to know what to ask for and how to ask for it. You also had to know nothing from Big Stew ever came for free. Oh yeah, you had to know that real good. Not many cars, not many carpets parked on Independence when I headed over to the diner. People didn't come to town for the country the way that they had in boom times. They hunkered down, tried to do without as much as they could. So did most of the folks who lived in town. I know they did, and I still do. I have to. I bet you're the same way. These days, who isn't? But Big Stew's joint was like the pool hall near the mill. It had some people in it, yeah, but it wasn't what you call jumping. Big Stew worried about it less than Arnie did, though, because he had the other stuff cooking on the side. Waitress wasn't too busy to nod at me. Hey, Jack, what do you know? She said. I'm okay, Lil. How about you? I answered. Lil's about my age. Oh, Lil's about the age my ma would have been if she'd been alive. I don't know why I can't read straight today. Eh. Oh my goodness. Yes. Hey, shouts out Brittany Hicks. I shouted you out at the beginning of the video. Uh, and I don't know why I didn't sub to you the first time I hit sub, so you should have got a notification about that. But I'm glad you're releasing some content because you got enough subs that shit that is going to jump as soon as you release it. Hmm. Trying to get my head on straight. I'm meeting up with your brother here in a little bit. Um, and it's even hot in the basement dungeon today, which is making no sense because it's not even supposed to be hot outside. Whatever. But hey, I'm okay, Lil. How about you? I answered. Lil's about the age my ma would be if she was alive. She uses powder and paint, though. Ma never did hold with them, so Lil looked a little younger most of the time. When the sun was streaming in through the big front window and caught her wrong, it was worse than if she didn't bother. But she had a kind heart. No matter she worked for Big Stew. She set a cup of coffee and a small bowl of stew on the counter. Eat up, she said, even though she knew I couldn't pay for him. He'll be in the back when you get done. Thank you kindly, was all the time I had before I dug in. Big Stews did make a hell of a beef stew. The bowl was empty, the coffee cup too. Way quicker than you could have got grouchy waiting. I touched the brim of my cap to Lil and went to the back room. You could hold wedding dinners there, or Odd Fellows wingdings, or poker parties, or dice games. Those mostly happened at night. During the day, it was pretty much empty except for Big Stew. Uh, they didn't call him that on account of he was tall. He had to look up at me, and I'm 5'10", about as ordinary as you get. They call him that because he was wide. He had a double chin, and his double chin had a double chin. His belly hung over his belt so far you couldn't see the buckle. Somebody who had ate that good 5 years after the bubble pop, you knew he had a bunch of irons in the fire. I touched my cap to him. One of his sausagey fingers moved toward the brim of his fedora, but didn't quite get there before his hand dropped again. Heard you were looking for me, I said. Big Stew, he never fancied wasting time on small talk. That's right. All his chins wobbled when he nodded. You're heading up to Particle City in a couple of days, aren't you? I sure am. We got a game against the Greasemen Friday. Back in those days, I played center for the Enid Eagles. Nobody gets rich playing semi-pro ball. It's a lot more semi than pro. But it was one more way to help fill in the cracks, if you know what I mean. Ponica City's an oil town, which is how come their team got the name it did. Okay, Big Stu said. Well, you could take that off for me while I 50 bucks if you do it right. Who do I have to kill? I was kidding, but I wasn't kidding awful hard. You can live for a month on 50 bucks. Couple of months if you really watch it. Not kill, just send a message loud and clear. You know that Claire Castairs? Or I'm sorry, that Charlie Castairs? I'm fucking up. Oh my goodness. I didn't know who he is. Everybody in Enid knew who Charlie Carstairs was. Whenever you needed your farm around there, a plow, a dowsing rod, you name it, chances are you'd buy it from Charlie. That's good. That's better than good, in fact. Wouldn't want you for this if you were his buddy. I did something for him, never mind what. Now he won't give me what he owes. So what I want you to rough up his kid brother in Ponica City. Big Stu scowled. I had to put out a geese to find out that he had a brother there at all, but I did it. He looked proud of himself then, like a moss-covered snapping turtle soaking up sun on a rock. You never sent me out for strong arm stuff before, I said slowly, which was close to true anyway. He looked at me, he looked into me. He could see more dark places inside my head than even I knew were there. His mouth twisted. Snapper's mouth doesn't work that way, but seeing him would make you think it did.
I'll Jack $100.
I was still pretty green in some ways. I didn't know I was dickering. He did, or figured he did, which amounted to the same thing. And when he came out with $100, why, my conscience spread its wings and flew away. You're on, I heard myself say. What's his name? Where do I find him? Big Stu didn't so much as smile. In his way, he was good.
It lives in a boarding house on Palm Street, not far from the city swimming pool. And name is Mitch.
He reached inside his jacket pocket and pulled out a scrap of paper. He held it out for me to take.
Here's the address.
I had to unfold it. The pencil scrawl read 527, palm number 13. I gave my best to try a tough guy chuckle. Lucky number, I said.
Lucky for you,
he answered.
You open the door and you clobber him good before he knows what's what. Then go to town from there, and then head on over to a conical ballpark, get yourself a couple of other kind of hits.
He laughed. Well, so did I. I'm not what you call proud to admit it, but I did. I'll do that. Big Stu reached into a different pocket, one where his billfold lived. He handed me a sawbuck.
Yeah, down payment, like. Buy yourself some groceries so Lil don't ruin my business trying to fatten you up.
How did he know? Part of his business was knowing things. The door to the back room was shut till I walked through it. So what? He knew anyhow. I got out of there. Sawbuck felt funny in my pocket. Heavy, not just a printed piece of paper. Heavy as blood, maybe. What else was it but blood money? Then I went back to the saloons by the flour mill. No, not to drink up my dividend. I like it fine, thank you, but I hold the bottle. It doesn't hold me. I was looking for some of the other Eagles to let them know I'd be going over to Ponica City a day early by my lonesome. Second place I stuck my nose into there was Ace McGinty, our number 2 pitcher. He had 2 or 3 empty schooners in front of him and a full one. You got to work to get plastered on 3-2 beer. Ace was working. I told him what I needed to tell him. The slow grin spread across his face. She must be pretty, he said and breathed fumes into my face. His hands shaped an hourglass in the air between us. If he wanted to think that, fine. He wouldn't think about Big Stu. I told a few lies. You know the kind I mean. That grin got wider on his country boy mug. He smelled like a brewery. I think he'd be our ace for real if he didn't drink so much. I had to hope he'd recall my news. The blue jay on the chain link fence around the mill screeched at me when I came out. Behind the fence, the damn zombie, or maybe it was another one, I don't know, was rolling a barrel of flour to a truck. He wasn't going real fast, but he was going. He'd keep going all night long, too. Why not? Wasn't like he'd get tired or hungry. Oh, man. I was getting hungry. Back at the shack, I had eaten a loaf of bread, going stale, and some beans I could boil up. I'll never make a cook now if I live to be 100. So I headed to Big Stu's again to spend some money in his joint. I don't know if the barbecue is as good as the stew, but it's plenty good enough. Live here, do you? Lil said. I kind of grunted and let that one alone. It was one of those jokes that would be funny if only it were funny, you know? Big Stu's is an awful lot nicer than where I did live. If it had a bed, I wouldn't have half minded staying there all the time. Then he could have found even more ways to land me in trouble. I ate up the barbecue. Since I had the 10 spot and the promise of more, I ate a slice of apple pie with cheese on top, too. I left Lil a dime for a tip. When I've got money, nobody can call me a cheapskate. By that time, it was getting dark outside. I let out a long, long sigh, got up and went home. Oh my goodness. So a dime is like actually a decent amount of money back then. Mm. All right, but yes, thank you, Brittany, for stopping by. I never heard from Against the World. Gee, there's like a 90% still pop his head in at some point, or watch this later and then just laugh every time I over enunciate his name. And either way, that's dope. But yeah, shouts out to Natural Onyx. Shouts out to Tupac. Happy birthday, Tupac. Yesterday was Tupac's birthday. Uh, so just remember, these Geminis out here are really awesome and creative people and deserve our support. Just like everyone else. And, I've been actually debating reading a couple Sagittarius books on here outside of Sagittarius season, but you guys have to just deal with getting it on your season like everybody else, because Cancer's coming up and we got a lot of dope writers too. Oh my goodness. Yes. Shouts out Don't Watch Continue. Shouts out Dog Rose. Shouts out Octawave. Mad love Octawave. Keep showing up and I love it. And yeah, shouts out the Alternate History Hub Discord. Shouts out the American Odyssey Project Discord. Shouts out the Coach Chat Discord. It's a lot more people, and I feel like I'm missing out. Shouts out Marie and Victor. We're going to dive back into this. Being ever so humble. I know you've heard the old chestnut. You want to know what I think? That's a pile of crap, too. If somebody burned down the shack I lived in, he would have done me a favor. It was on the outskirts of Enid, where the town turns into a farm country without quite knowing it's doing that. My pa, he lit out for California year before last. Carpet came by heading west. He hopped on and he was out of there. Took all the money in the place, too. $7 and some odd cents, I think it was. Can't say I missed him much. We didn't get along while he was here, which is putting it mildly. No note or anything to tell me where he'd gone. He doesn't have his letters. The old lady across the street let me know the next day. I was doing something or other for Big Stu, so I wasn't around when he hightailed it. Hell, if I had been, I might have gone with him. Then this would be a different story. I can't say how, but different for sure. It'd be a different story if my ma were still around too. I barely remember her. I was 5, I guess, and I was all excited on account of I was going to have a new baby brother or sister. And he would have been a brother if he'd lived. That's what Pa told me, only he didn't. Neither did Ma. And so it was Pa and me. And then it was only me. I went back to the place to sleep and to eat what I couldn't afford, Big Stews or one of the other joints, and that was about it. Some guys on their own make pretty fair housekeepers, but not me. Pa used to say I could burn water when I boiled it. I won't tell you he was wrong exactly, but I will say he was one to talk. When I got inside, I lit a kerosene lantern, and that let me find my beat up old cardboard suitcase. It's longer and thinner than most, so it'll hold a couple or 3 bats. I put them in 2 Louisville sluggers and 1 Adirondack, and my spikes and glove and gray flanneled uniform with Enid Eagles across the front in red fancy letters. Then I put some ordinary clothes too. And since I was supposed to send this Mitch Carstairs a message, I dropped a blackjack and some brass knuckles into the suitcase. Big Stu's plan looked pretty good to me. Get in the first lick and make it count. They'd help. Where'd I get them? You do things for Big Stu, you get stuff like that, just in case. I hadn't used them much before, but I had them. What's up, Genesis Animations? One love. Subs for subs. Across the road, the old gal who told me Pod headed west had the radio on so loud I could hear Amos and Andy inside my place. She's deaf as a brick. She had power in her house, though. We never did. If we had, they would have shut it off because we couldn't pay the bill. Power, I laughed. Well, that wasn't real funny either. What kind of power? I would have been good enough to play pro ball, maybe claw my way up to the bigs even. I can run, I can catch, I can throw. You play center field, you got to be able to do all those things. But my hitting's on the puny side. Always had been, damn it. I went to a tryout for the Dallas Steers once. He saw me with the bat in the hands and said, "Sorry, Sonny," patted me on the head and sent me on my way. They reckoned they could find better. Worst of it is they were right. After I packed, I didn't have to do a thing till I caught the bus for Ponica City the next morning. I carried the lantern into my room, blew it out, and went to bed. I could still hear Amos and Andy from across the street. I didn't care. With a full belly and a little cash, I didn't care about anything more than a dog would. If you're poor enough, life gets pretty simple. Yes, One Love, Genesis Animations, Octawave, Brittany Hicks. Ends the world. I had stale bread for breakfast instead of coughing up another quarter at the diner. And I lugged my sorry suitcase to Red Ball Bus Line station on East Maple. The bus wouldn't set out for another hour and a half after I got there, but I could do nothing at the station as well as I could at home. Better even, they set out newspapers in the waiting room. Today's Enid Morning News and the Tulsa Tribune from the day before yesterday. Pa didn't know how to read and write, but I do. I'm glad I do. It's handy and it kills time both. I grabbed the Tribune. It had a funny page and the morning news didn't. The hour and a half turned to 2.5. The bus came late. I was ticked but not surprised Red Ball did things like that. The Tribune had a story about a king, or maybe he was just a minister, way on the other side of the ocean who promised he'd make everything run on time. Big Stu would have bet against him, I'd expect. A guy who looked like a drummer and another who looked like he maybe be a full werewolf at full moon time got off the bus when it finally did chug in. Me and a black guy, we climbed on. He went to the back. I sat a couple rows behind the driver. The bus wasn't anywhere close to crowded. 20 miles north from Enid, US 81 and US 60 are the same road. Then US 81 goes north into Kansas, 60 swings east. The road wasn't close to crowded either. A few trucks, a few fivers, us, a few carpets overhead. Costs about the same to ship by magic or by wheels. If it didn't, one would run the other out of business. Kids played baseball in the fields by the highway. A lot of them should have been in school, but they played anyhow. I never did any such thing, and if you buy that, I'll tell you another one. White kids and colored kids and native kids, they all just played together as separate. They sort out rules of how things worked when they got bigger. I must have seen half a dozen games by the time 60 forked off 81. There's Pond Creek and Lamont, little no-account places. And then eventually there's Ponica City. It's about 60 miles from Enid. Only felt like forever because the bus went so slow and stopped at every other farmhouse, it seemed like. Halfway between Pond Creek and Lamont, it stopped in the middle of nowhere. Driver says something that made a lady chuckle like a laying hen. I leaned out into the aisle to look through the windshield. A load of rocks was spilled across the highway and a carpet down beside the verge. The only way the wizard on that carpet could have looked glummer was if the rocks had smashed the car and folks in it. Drunk or just sloppy, he fouled up his spell in some kind of way. We wouldn't make it to Ponica City or even Lamont till these rocks got cleared. We all piled out of the bus, even the lady who chuckled and started shoving. The unhappy wizard helped some, too. So did a family in the humpmobile. A couple of farmers brought their mules. A clucking lady wagged her finger in the wizard's face.
"Your company will pay for this,"
she said, all angry.
I am my company.
he answered.
Then you will.
She said, which sure didn't turn him any more cheerful. I wasn't what you'd call happy either. I muttered some ungodly things while I hauled rocks. Just what I need to mash a foot so I couldn't run, or smash a finger so I couldn't throw, or hold a bat, or swing a good right at Mitch Carstairs. But my luck stayed in. I didn't hurt myself. I didn't even rip my pants. We finally cleared a path wide enough for the bus to sneak through. The passengers climbed aboard. The family got back into their car. The farmers took the mules away, and the damn fool wizard just sat there on his carpet with his head in his hands, like he dropped the last on the bottom of the ninth and cost his team the game. I know that feeling. I wish I didn't. It's not a good one. We left Enid late. We had trouble on the road, so we got to Ponica City bus station later than late. One guy in there waiting for the bus. Oh, he was hopping mad. He cussed worse than I did, shifting those rocks and a lot louder. Didn't do him any good, mind, but he was too steamed to care. I carried my suitcase to the rooming house where the Eagles stay when they come to Ponica City. It was only a few blocks from the one where Charlie Carstairs' kid brother was staying, so that was handy. I'd made up some song and dance about why I was in town a day ahead of the rest of the team, but I turned out not to need it. As soon as the landlady, a widow woman, saw who I was, she nodded and said,
Heard you were coming in early. I'll put you in 7 tonight.
heard from who, I wondered, but I didn't need to be Hercule Sherlock or whatever his name is to cipher that out. Big Stu knows folks all over Oklahoma, into Kansas and Texas, and maybe Arkansas too. One of them must have put a flea in her ear. Room 7 was a lot less crowded than it would have been 4 or 5 of us in there like usual. I picked a bed with a mattress that was less sway-backed, and with luck, I'd get to keep it. Well, half of it when the rest of the Eagles came up from eating it. You stay at a rooming house, you have supper with the rest of the lodgers. That's part of the bill. It's not a fancy supper, or they'd charge more. I wasn't fancy. Where else would I go? Ponica City didn't have a diner anywhere near as good as Big Stew's. One of the gals at the table, a secretary or something, I guess, looked nice. Not that I want to run off to the Sandwich Islands with you, sweetie, nice, but enough to keep my mind off the pinto beans soup and tin peas boiled all gray. She didn't even notice me. She had eyes for one of the other fellows. So I finished eating, put my dishes in the sink like a good boy, and went back to my room. Nothing much to do in there, so I did nothing for a while. Not like I didn't have to practice doing nothing back at the shack. Woo! Must have been about 9 o'clock when I clinched my belt a notch tighter. Then I pulled my knuckle duster in one front pocket of my trousers and my black jacket in the other. I walked around there a bit to make sure the pants stayed up all right. They were fine. So I slipped out of my room, out into the rooming house, and over toward where Mitch Carstairs stayed. Good thing it wasn't far. I didn't know my way around Ponica City really well, and it was dark as the inside of a zombie's brain out there. I wore a cross around my neck to fight off vampires, but having faith helps too. I wasn't exactly feeling what you'd call faithful just then, not with the job that I had ahead of me. I might have walked right past the place if a car hadn't picked up that second to turn. The highlight beams spread out and lit up the brass numbers 527 on the building. It was yellow brick, 2 stories high, bigger than the rooming house where I was. When I tried to get the front door, it opened. Figure it would. People still come and go at that hour. More brass numbers over the doorways which showed which room was which. I slipped down the hall quiet as I could till I got to 13. Light leaked out under the bottom of the door. That made me let out a sigh of relief. He was home. What would I have done if he decided to spend the night playing bridge with his buddies? Wait in the bushes till he came back? I'd had notions I'd liked better. It was dark out there, and I wasn't sure I'd recognize him at high noon. I mean, I knew what Charlie Carstairs looked like, but I didn't have any promise Mitch looked the same way. Big Stu should have given me a picture. Should have thought to ask for one back in Enid. But I didn't have to worry about any of that now. I slipped my right hand into the brass knuckles. I made a fist in my pocket while I knocked on the door with my left hand. Somebody moved in the room. I could hear it over my pounding heart. No, I wasn't used to the rough stuff. This was worse than facing a wild fireballer with the bases loaded and the team down two in the late innings. The door opened. It seemed like slow motion. Yeah, I was that tensed up. I could only haul off and cold cock the first thing I saw on the other side. If something had fouled up some kind of way, it wasn't Charlie Carstairs' brother. I'd feel bad about wailing the snot out of the wrong guy. Big Stu probably wouldn't pay me the 90 he still owed me either. Odds were he'd take the first 10 out of my hide. Then the door got all the way open, and I started to ask, "You Mitch Carstairs?" As soon as the guy in the room went, yeah, or uh-huh, or who wants to know, I let him have it. Only I couldn't. Even the question clogged in my throat, because it wasn't some guy who in the room. It was a girl. She was somewhere near my age, dark blonde hair and a peppermint wave, green eyes, pert nose, prettier than the secretary-type gal back at the rooming house. Not actress pretty, I guess, but not far from it. Yes. Up. I was like, yes, she said to me, her voice deep for a girl's. God damn Big Stu to helling on. He didn't say anything about a girl. She complicated everything in spades, she did. But I needed that money the way I needed air to breathe. So instead of what I meant to ask, I came out with, "Where's Mitch Carstairs?" Those green eyes got a little wide. "I'm Mitch Carstairs. I don't think I know you." She felt like she'd sucker punched me, not the other way around, and I realized I hadn't even known what I was doing yet, and I swore at Big Stu in my head before. He had a magic done, looking for Charlie Carstairs' kid brother, and the wizard said Michelle, and he heard Mitchell. Or maybe the wizard screwed up, I didn't know, and I still don't. But I did know that no matter how bad I needed those 90 clams, I did need 'em bad enough to have to beat up a dame to get 'em. I'm no vampire. I'm no vampire. I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror. I couldn't do what Big Stu wanted done, not if my life depended on it. Then I might be laying my life on the line by not doing it. I didn't think about that. Not then. Fool that I was. Real fast, I said, "No, miss, you don't know me, but you're Charlie Carstairs' sister, aren't you? Charlie Carstairs over needed?" "That's right." She gave off an automatic nod. "Has something happened to—" She broke off. "He's fine. Now. So are you. Now. If you stick around Ponica City for even another day, though, you won't be. Once Big Stu found out I'd messed up, he'd send some guys who didn't worry about what they hit as long as they got paid." Still fast, I went on. "Get out of town. Get out of state. Go to California." Yes, I had pie in my head. "Just go quick as you can. Get." I might have been shooing a stray dog. Her eyes got wider again. Wider this time. "I can't do that." "Sister, you can't do anything else. Not if you want to stay in one piece. I know what I'm talking about." I pulled out my right hand with the knuckle buster still on it. If I tried to take the damn thing off, it would have looked like I was playing pocket pool. She saw what it was, of course, but she didn't raise any fuss. She must have seen I wasn't about to use it. After I stuck it back in my pocket, I said, "Yeah, I know all right. Some pieces of work you just can't do." "Thank you," she said quietly, her mouth twisted. You want to know how pretty she was? She was still pretty when it did. That's how pretty. For all I know, she might have got even prettier. With her face cleared, she nodded once more. This time to herself, not me. "All right, I'll be gone tomorrow. I don't know where. I don't know what I'll do. I haven't got much money, but—" "Neither do I stuck in. "Why'd you reckon I came up here?" "Thank you," she said again, even softer this time. Then she closed the door on me. Not slammed it, but closed it. I didn't mind. We'd already said everything we had to say to each other, hadn't we? I got the hell out of there. I hope she'd get the hell out of there. Get the hell out of Oklahoma come morning. Well, I'd done everything I knew how to do. If it wasn't what Big Stu wanted, I was almost to the rooming house front door when I really truly realized I'd just crossed the guy who ran a lot more of my hometown than the mayor ever did. The door opened. A man, I guessed it was one of the lodgers, came in. He was skinny and sad looking, with worn clothes and gray hair getting thin at the front. He could have been anybody. He paid me no special mind. I could have been anybody too. Some other lodger's friend, or maybe a new lodger he hadn't met yet. Only I wasn't anybody, not anymore. Or not just anybody. I was somebody dumb enough to get Big Stu pissed off at him. In Enid, you couldn't get much dumber than that. Ugh. Oh. But Stu wanted to hurt Charlie Carstairs through his kid brother, only she turned out to be Charlie Carstairs' sister. He couldn't hurt me, though anybody else. Everyone I might have cared about was either dead or gone. No, he'd have to pay me back in person. All of a sudden, what I'd told Mitch Carstairs looked pretty good advice for me to take, too. My father got away from Big Stu I got, the better off I'd be. The farther away from Big Stu I got, the better off I'd be. Ugh. If I had any smarts, I'd ride a hitch or hop a freight to jump on the carpet the way my old man did. If I had any smarts, I'd do it tonight. I wouldn't wait for the sun up. The sooner the better. But I didn't have any smarts. What I had was a game tomorrow. I couldn't let the other Eagles down, not on account of Big Stu. Hal Snodgrass, our backup outfielder, he was slower than an armadillo after it meets a Model A. I almost hoped a vampire would try to jump me on the walk back to the boarding house. Maybe I'd fight him off and work out some of what I was feeling. Maybe he'd get me and turn me into something like him. Then I wouldn't care about anything past my next drink of blood. Cow or sheep or coyote blood. Maybe even go after people too, if I was bold. No vampires, though. Nothing but the shining stars out of a clear, dark sky. The air was cold, close to crisp. Pretty soon it would get hot and sticky and stay that way for months. But that hadn't happened yet. Skeeters hadn't come out either. Without so much on my mind, I might have enjoyed the walk. My landlady hadn't locked the front door. I'd timed it all fine. About the only thing I'd done right since I got to Ponica City. I went to my room, laid myself down, and tried to sleep. Took a while, but I did it. I don't remember the dreams I had. I do remember they were the kind you want to forget. Okay. So I guess we're going to call it right here. Because this was a really good read, but I got a couple things to do this evening. So once again, big shouts out to Octawave, Brittany Hicks, Genesis Animations, all kinds of love to Against the World G. Shouts out Don't Watch Continue. Shouts out Dog Rose. Shouts out the Trash Panda. Shouts out all the different Discord servers. Y'all better hit that like button because that was just the first chapter and we can do a whole lot more if I get some likes. But thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope you guys enjoy this beautiful evening. One love, faux faith, and FA gang. Gang, gang.